Thanks, Taylor.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see what happens with the weather shortly. The February 19th meeting of the Baltimore County Planning Board is called to order. I'm Scott Holupka, chair of the board. We'll start the meeting with a roll call to account for the members of the board present. When you hear your name, please say aye. Mr. O'Reilly?
Aye.
Mr. Brady? Ms. Brophy?
Aye.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Ms. German?
Aye.
Mr. Heckman?
Aye.
Mr. Heinel? Mr. Hinton? Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Miss Lilly? Miss Munez?
Aye.
Miss Pinero?
Aye.
Mr. Schulman?
Aye.
Mr. Tennant? All right. Enough for a quorum. Will you now please join
Hey,
me
Scott, I'm
in
here as well.
reciting- I'm sorry?
Should be.
Will you please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any changes to the tentative agenda as published?
No changes.
And the February 12th email, you received draft minutes from the February 5th meeting. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to review those minutes. Are there any corrections or additions to the February 5th, 2026 meeting minutes? Hearing none, I will now accept a motion to accept the minutes as circulated.
Motion.
Motion. Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. This evening, we have the opportunity to discuss and then vote on the 2026 basic services maps. This item was first introduced to the board on January 15th, 2026, and a public hearing was conducted on February 5th. Mr. Andrew Brown from the Department of Public Works and Transportation is here to answer any questions that the board may have as we discuss them before we vote. Mr. Brown, is there anything you would like to add before we have our discussion?
No additions at this time, but happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. I will now open the floor to any discussions, comments.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Brown.
Sure.
I have spent probably over almost 2 hours looking at all the correspondence we have received about this proposed plan. And I have to say, I'm kind of baffled. I'm not, there's a lot of technical stuff that's been going on for the past 20 years. And even though Councilman Patoka added the area around Joppa Falls Road to the map last year, and then even subsequently followed up with, let's see, who was it? Mr. Thornton, with some email questions about what's been going on down around the area of Lake Roland. Can you summarize like what's going on for us? Because every year we get the same correspondence, and I thought maybe what Councilman Patoka did last year would address those comments and concerns, but apparently it has not. So, can you enlighten us on what you think the issue might be?
So are you specifically speaking to the changes to the deficient area in Brooklynville, or are you talking about the Lake
Yes.
Roland?
Well, I think they're related, are they not?
I think they're being compared, but the two areas are separate.
Okay. I was under the impression that they were related, and I understand it's not a a capacity at the station issue, and that it's related to maybe pipe sizes and another facility that you guys are going to be putting in. Will that solve the problem or the concerns, you think, or is there something going on with Baltimore City and that whole thing?
So the specifically the Brooklynville area, there's development underway to basically install a relief sewer in that area. So once that's
Right.
complete, that will address the issues, or we believe that it'll address the issues in Brooklynville. We'll obviously monitor that, but assuming that it does address those issues as expected, then we would anticipate removing that area of concern from the maps for Brooklynville.
What about the concerns going on with Lake Roland? Is that under you guys or?
So the projects, so we haven't flagged Lake Roland as an area of concern. There is a project underway in that area, and so that's basically a structural rehab project, and that project consists of actually doing structural lining underneath Lake Roland. That project originally started with an inspection where we noticed corrosion to the concrete pipe under Lake Roland. And so that was sort of the origination there. And then, of course, that project, while that's being done, they're also doing some rehabilitation work to the nearby pipes in that area, because we typically try to look at the whole region for addressing, structural rehab and things like that.
Okay, so even though we're doing that work, it's not an area of concern right now because we are addressing it. Is that correct?
Well, I think probably one thing that's worth clarifying is that just because we're doing rehabilitation work doesn't mean that an area has deficient capacity or would be flagged as an area of concern. We have numerous rehabilitation projects all over the county, and so a lot of this is done, as sort of proactive. We want to extend the service life of pipes. We want to rehabilitate pipes before there are failures. So it's not to say, oh, we need to expand the capacity and this is deficient, but rather that we are, basically long-term trying to address issues before they happen.
Okay, appreciate it.
Any other questions, comments? I mean, we've certainly gotten that, as Mr. Heckman said, we've certainly received a lot of correspondence both this year and in the past, so. I am not seeing any hands. I will therefore entertain a motion.
Be it moved that the Baltimore County Planning Board recommends the adoption by the County Council of the 2026 Basic Services Map for Public Water, Public Sewerage, and Transportation per the memoranda as submitted by the Director of the Department of Public Works and Transportation at the January 15th, 2026 Planning Board meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We will now do a roll call vote. When I call your name, please say aye or nay. Mr. Array,
Aye.
Mr. Brady,
Aye.
Ms. Brophy,
Aye.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Ms. German,
Aye.
Mr. Heckman,
Aye.
Mr. Heinel,
Aye.
Mr. Hinton,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
I don't think Miss Lilly is with us yet. Miss Munez,
Aye.
Miss Pinero,
Aye.
Mr. Schulman,
Aye.
Mr. Tennant.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. Till next year when we get to revisit all this. Next on our agenda, we have a presentation by Mr. Terry Hickey, Director of the Department of Housing and Community Development, regarding the Housing Needs Assessment Report that was recently completed. Following Mr. Hickey's presentation, the board will have the opportunity to ask questions. Please join me in welcoming Director Hickey.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is my first time having a chance to address the planning board, and I'm happy to do it in such a fashion as to bring our first ever housing needs assessment. My excuse for probably not having presented to all of you before is we've only been in apartments since 2021, but hopefully this will be the first of many collaborative efforts. Want to recognize Director Lafferty on as well. And I think one of the interesting things in a lot of smaller jurisdictions, at least, housing capacity falls under the planning department. And so what I'm happy to say is that as we try to move forward with a strategy to address housing needs in the county, we've had strong partners at the planning department. And I think we've presented this to council and had a lot of community discussions about this. And I think the one thing we all agree on is if we're going to get housing produced in this county in any meaningful way and address the need, it's going to start with data and planning. So we're trying to bring data to the party, and I'm thrilled to have all of you involved in this as well. I think just a little bit of level setting. So I'm going to assume most of you on the board are at least somewhat familiar with the voluntary compliance agreement that the county signed in 2016. Lots of historic reasons for that. I won't go through a lot of the tenets of the agreement, but suffice to say it has a requirement for a number of units we're meant to help create and a map that lays out the areas of the county that we should put those units in. And when I first came to the county and was involved with the VCA, I realized at its heart, it was a civil rights document. It was here to address historic wrongs, but it wasn't a housing strategy. The 1,000 units we're required to produce don't come anywhere close to meeting actual need. And the agreement itself is frozen in time in 2016 with areas of opportunity then when things like Trade Point Atlantic didn't exist yet. So I guess without demeaning our responsibility under this very serious agreement with the federal government, it's also very clear that we need to chart a path forward. And most of the conversations, if you follow the housing debates in public, center around either the VCA or anecdotal information about housing. It's sort of the old joke, if you're in a giant hole, you're not going to measure the dirt, you better start shoveling. We know there's a need, but regional numbers, regional reports, information out of state DHCD weren't really helping to drive the conversation. So we decided to take advantage of the timing while the last county executive was in office and kick off a housing needs assessment. Rex, I think, are you able to pull up? We're going to run through and I think you hopefully have copies of these slides. If not, we'll get them to you after, but this will give you something to follow along. The actual assessment is about 100 slides long. So mercifully, we've given you a small dose tonight. We'll hit the high points, the headlines. But I know, and I've already had discussions with Scott, this should be an ongoing conversation. So if a question doesn't come up tonight, feel free to scour the needs assessment and would love to have one-off conversations after the fact. So the needs assessment, all 100 pages of it. It's an analysis of the county's current population and housing stock. It's a projection of how population will likely change over the next 10 to 15 years. If we want to get in discussions of methodology later, Rex is on, but if not, we'll just keep going. We're projecting population growth with existing housing stock. We're looking at how the existing housing stock meets the actual need of what we're seeing the population is, and an overview of the changes needed for that housing stock to meet growing need. We talk a lot about a need for more housing. But what we don't always talk about is what type of housing we need and for who. The VCA, for instance, assumes larger families and heavy weight on 3+ bedroom units. You'll see in a few minutes what the housing needs assessment speaks to. I mentioned before, we've largely focused our housing strategy around the VCA. So this is an attempt to take localized data in real time and start to generate a conversation. I think what you noticed, what others have noticed, we didn't release this in tandem with a fully formed plan. Knowing the county, knowing the different concerns and thoughts about housing, it doesn't make sense to issue a report and then say, by the way, this is what we're going to do. And I think that's what's gotten us in trouble in the past. There's a heavy emphasis on the needs of the different council districts. You're all very aware of the role of the council in zoning and land use decisions. What we really wanted to do was to honestly start a conversation. We want to put the numbers out there, let them speak for themselves, start to generate conversation. You're going to notice we don't refer to specific projects in here. That would certainly, when people think about a specific housing development, proposed or otherwise, that tends to take us down a whole different side road. What this assessment also does not do is make any assumptions as where in the county the housing should go. That's really a conversation that should involve all of you, the different departments, the council, communities. But when I presented this to the council and when we've talked to council members offline, they all agree that what we really need to start with is real planning and an agreement where development is appropriate and also where infrastructure is needed, and to try to get out ahead. So what this document is not, it's not a fully formed strategy. It doesn't provide a tremendous number of answers, but it starts to shed some light on the paths we're going to want to go down. To do the assessment, we collaborated with a group called Guidehouse Consulting and their affordable housing division, and particularly Vince Reyna and the University of Pennsylvania's Housing Initiative, which has been doing this around the country in a very effective manner. So we were lucky to get Vince and his team working on this. Took us several months to pull together. And the bottom line is, no surprise, we have a housing challenge. There's not enough housing to meet current need. There's certainly not enough housing to meet future need. And what I'm going to continue to talk about throughout this brief presentation is, it isn't just the raw need. The thing that was so interesting when we started to pick apart the numbers is it's the mismatch of housing types. If we look at who we are and how we're growing and who will be seeking housing, some of the ways we've worked on developing this, we think about single family housing on larger lots. Those have been the cause of any number of political discussions. But in reality, who's looking for that housing? How are they composed? And how does this factor into the cost discussion? So real quick, Rex, you go to the next slide. This presentation was developed to use in a variety of settings. I won't spend a ton of time on this, but just on the off chance that, excuse me, anybody on the board is not familiar with the AMI concept, we really hate putting people into numbered boxes, but when we're looking at developing housing, particularly subsidized housing, that's exactly what we have to do in the beginning. So at the top shows, and these are 2025 numbers, these are updated annually. You look at area median income. So we take the size of the household, and then we look at, for instance, a 4-person household at 60% AMI, which is the standard the VCA operates under. That would be sort of squarely in the middle of that affordable region. The family would have to make approximately $72,000 a year to qualify for that type of subsidized unit. And you can kind of peruse this as you will. HUD also puts out market rents based on AMI. So if you look at that same 4-person household and go down, a fair market rent at 60% AMI would be approximately $1,800 a month. So believe it or not, when I've met with developers in some communities, there's a belief that when we invest in a housing development, that we give the developer a stack of vouchers. And that's how we do affordable housing. And in essence, spreading Section 8 programs and others in order to create new units. It's definitely not the way things work. When we invest, we work with a developer to say, how many units at what AMI? What is your plan for your operating expenses? What gap would this leave in order for you to make the deal pencil out? And is there a way through a combination of tools that we can close that gap? And then we use legal instruments, loan documents, pilot agreements, declarations of covenants that run with the land to enforce that affordability over a 15, 20, 40-year period. But everything we're going to talk about in this is going to relate back to this AMI. And the thing I want to impress is there's not necessarily one standard anymore of what affordable housing is. Most federal money requires residents or beneficiaries to be 80% or below. But if you look at the way wage stagnation has kind of crept through, folks even at 100% AMI are certainly going to be squarely in that need for small A affordable housing. When you get down to 30% AMI, that's that trigger line for things like accessibility of voucher programs. Those are our very vulnerable, low income, generally having some kind of documented disability. And certainly all of our supportive housing for people experiencing homelessness is going to fall below 30, sometimes as low as 5 to 0% AMI, meaning no income whatsoever. Next slide. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the actual results in the assessment. So the first finding I want to talk to you about is that the county is experiencing a severe shortage of housing at the lowest income brackets. And I want to explain a little bit about how we got to the number. So the assessment found the county has approximately just under 24,000 existing renter households that would qualify at 30% or below AMI. That's that very low vulnerable income level. But only just a little over 4,900 units in the county that were affordable and available for families at that income level. That leaves us at that gap of just under 19,000. I want to point this out now because I think we struggled with this data when we first got it, and we were trying to put it into terms that would resonate with the people that were reviewing it. At first glance, if you think, wow, Baltimore County needs 19,000 very low income units, well, that sounds to me like it's a plan for big multifamily buildings with hundreds of units at very low level income. You know, some might call those housing projects, subsidized housing, public housing. That's not a workable solution in Baltimore County, not the least of the reasons that we don't own any property and have no plans to. What this is the result of, after a lot of thinking and looking at the numbers, is think of the county housing issue as a bubble. We have a lack of housing across all the income bands. And so what you're going to see is that we have households at higher AMIs that are living, consuming units that may be far below their corresponding income. So maybe in order to live in the county near my family home, I come back from college, my first job, I want to live near where I work. The apartment that I can find or the house I can find may not be in a part of the county I planned on living, may not be convenient, but it's available. And look, it's well below my price range, so I can start to save some money. We're also seeing downsizing seniors competing with affordable units as well, folks on fixed incomes. And so you've got seniors, recent college grads, small starter families, and others all competing for limited housing stock. In the meantime, the way I'd look at that 19,000 number is you have a large number of already low income families living in the county already here that don't have a unit that fits their AMI band. And what I mean by that is they are predominantly living in units much more expensive than what they can afford. So while they consume up and others consume down, eventually we have a log jam. The bubble's going to bend. Eventually the bubble's going to break. People at the top of the bubble who will get frustrated without being able to find the type of housing they want, and that could include home ownership, will eventually leave. Those at the bottom end of the bubble who have established families here, their kids go to school, they don't have a lot of extra disposable income, they're not going to be able to leave. They're going to continue to pay much too much for rent, and eventually they're going to fall through the bottom, which is into the safety net that's already severely taxed in the county. That's the type of movement that we want to try to address. And so I'll keep going back to that analogy as we go. But if you look at this, slide 4 tells you a few things. It looks at the number, almost 19,000 that's needed, and it looks at the cost burden for rent households. 80% of households at below 30% AMI that we just talked about would be considered cost burden, meaning they're spending at least a third of their income on rent and housing related expenses. 44% of households at that middle AMI, 30 to 60, and 18% of households from 60 to 80. And the shortage of those lowest income units creates cascading effects throughout the entire housing supply that can have an impact across the board. And then Rex, if you want to move to the next slide, what we'll do is we're going to occasionally just give you a graphic depiction. So I won't repeat what I just said, but this slide comes directly from the assessment, and you can see where the bubble's pushing out at the bottom with that green line. These are the actual units priced in that AMI band and the number of people that should be living in units that correspond with that relative rental cost. And you can see the huge imbalance. The reason I mention the imbalance piece so much is you might look at the top and say, well, it looks like maybe we have enough housing to get by. The problem is the lack of production is pushing everybody together in the middle, which creates some of the issues that I just described. Next slide. And then this slide's just going to show you a little more. So just I'll point out quickly, and you can go through this at your leisure. But the chart on the right, the yellow shows the depth of the issues amongst multiple income levels. So this sort of describes in a graph what I was just talking about in my narration, which is to the left, you've got much higher amounts of rent burdening. So the folks that are here already low income are spending 30 to 50 or more % of their income on housing. And then you can see how that cascades up as you get to the right. Next slide. So as we said in the last slide, the scope goes beyond, this isn't just a very low AMI issue. If we zoom out and look at the problem at a distance, we see, and this was an incredible number when we presented it to council, 55%, over half of all county renters, regardless of income, are cost burdened. That accounts for over 56,000 households. Even more staggering that within that number, almost 30,000 households, 29% of all renters in the county are severely cost burdened, meaning they spend 50% or more of their income on housing expenses. You'll see also as we go that the issue is not limited to renters. We did do some looking at home ownership in the study and found that in total, we see cost burdening amongst about 52,000 homeowner households. So it's a little bit of a flatter curve, but if you take it all, put it together, we have well over 100,000 households in the county living in some form of housing that are paying a significant amount of their paycheck just to maintain the housing they have, be it renter or home-owned. Let's go to 8. So looking at this slide, again, you see that the cost burdening is more acutely seen for renter households at the lowest income levels, with over 90% of renters in every income bracket below 50,000 being cost burdened. But here you're going to see the issue is not limited just to lower income families, as over half of renter households making between $50,000 and $75,000 a year are cost burdened, and nearly a quarter of renters at the $75,000 to $100,000 range are cost burdens as well. And this also shows the spikes over the last decade for the higher income levels that make up the cost burdening pool. And what it tells us is that, and I'm oversimplifying it, but the cost of housing is sort of blowing past very low income households and is starting to eat away at the take home income of people at higher AMIs. In other words, housing's too expensive for just about anybody, no matter what it is they're looking for. Let's go to slide 9. This will just give you kind of a graphic depiction of homeowners as well, and I won't go back through this one again, but you'll kind of get a sense of where this hits homeownership. Let's go to 10. So, like I mentioned before, this is the second headline that came out of the assessment, that we have a misalignment of housing stock with what's actually needed. So to kind of get your mind around this, we first need to look at the trends within the current population. We know the population growth has been slow in the last few years. I'm sure you're aware of that. The assessment does predict that slow growth or close to stagnant growth will continue, with a projected growth using this methodology of about 8,400 residents by 2037. The figure is going to be outpaced by growth in the number of households. So while we're expecting 8,400 residents during that same time period, we expect to grow over 12,000 households. That's another concept we struggled to get our heads around. But what we realized when looking at the data is that even though population growth may be flattening somewhat, households are thinning out and they're spreading. And what we see nationally are younger individuals more likely to get married later in life or not at all, couples having children later in life, fewer children or no children at all. The household units are getting smaller. So people are looking for a different type of housing. The 4-bedroom single family home on an acre may be a dream, but it's not a fiscal reality for a couple without children looking for a certain ability to get into a house at a certain price point for homeownership or rental. We certainly have a lack on the smaller unit size at the time in our progression that we would argue more and more people are looking for 1 or 2 bedrooms. This plays into the affordability equation because modestly priced 3-bedroom townhome may have a monthly rent or a sales price that meets the definition of affordable, maybe for a family of 4, but the rent or sales price would be out of the reach for many single individuals living on their own that do want to find housing in the county. So with this in mind, what the data was showing is a disconnect between housing and household size. While 65% of county households are made up of 1 of 2 individuals, and that was another eye-opening stat. 65% of our households are 1 or 2 individuals. Only 37.5% of the units in the county are studios, 1 or 2 bedrooms. So in addition to the challenges the average small family faces when finding an affordable available unit, they're also contending with the fact that the majority of units that are maybe available are too big, and certainly too big to be quote unquote affordable, even if they would be considered reasonably priced. So I know the single family home versus apartment oftentimes becomes part of a political discussion or debate, but there's also this idea of the real person looking for real housing that they can afford is automatically excluded from a large chunk of the housing stock because it doesn't align with their actual need and their short-term growth. Let's go to 11. And again, I'm gonna not spend so much time on the visualizations because I know time is short and I'm sure there's going to be thoughts and questions you want to share. So this just takes out of the study a visualization of what I just talked about, and you can kind of see how the mismatch plays out. Let's go to 12. This just shows that the trending issue is going to continue to worsen. Within the last decade, between 2013 and 2023, the net number of households with 3 or more members decreased by 2,165. The county added over twice as many net units with 3 or more bedrooms during that time than it did units with 2 or less. Now, if you read articles out there, there's a lot of, just an aside, there's a lot of debate that developers are forced to build these much bigger units and homes because of the size of lots, which gets us into these discussions that planners love to get in the middle of, which are, let's do smaller lots. Let's change the land use rules. There's bills in Annapolis this year that would purport to do that. And there's counter arguments that that won't get the results we want. So recognizing that there's a debate, what we're trying to point out is we've not necessarily been targeting our incentivification and strategy and policy of the types of units that are being built with what people actually want. We're getting pulled into a single family house versus apartment debate without thinking in terms of actual need, desire, and cost. And that's something that a housing plan should take into consideration. Let's go to, what are we on now? 11, let's go to the next slide. So this was one that the county council really seized upon as well. Not only do we have a mismatch and a lack of production, but we have a rapidly aging housing stock. So you can see 32% of all county housing units were built before 1960, 58 before 1980, and 85% of all of our housing units were built at least a quarter century ago. another aside, just as the housing director who's trying to figure out how to tackle this problem, what we notice in the county is, because of a number of reasons, lower inventory on the newer side of multifamily, but there actually is a very healthy stock of older apartment buildings in the county, many of them held by private entities, many very much in need of improvement. There's a lot of volatility in that market now as people attempt to either sell off old inventory, potentially to investors. We've seen apartment complexes be flipped to investors who raise the rents, put a modicum of work, and a number of the people living there lose their housing. So in Baltimore County particularly, my job is not to just be focused on new housing production, but we have to focus on preservation. How can we ensure that these much older units receive investment and protected affordability into the future? So if you followed any of the work we're doing, recent deals with MCB Real Estate and others, we've focused on models that allow for housing to be purchased by private parties with the county's help, renovated, made highly livable, add amenities, and then take a portion of that building and make sure those units are subsidized for a number of years, up to 40 years, where we know they will be accessible to people in those respective income bands. We don't have a right of first refusal law in the county like they do in Prince George's. There's no automatic mechanism other than staying on top of this and making sure that we take this naturally occurring affordable as it tends to move around in this market and make sure that there's a plan in place for preserving as much of it as we can. Obviously, this doesn't create new units, but the other thing I want to point out is we do have significant challenges with these older units, and you will see apartment complexes that council members remind me constantly, they may technically be affordable, but they need a lot of work. They have heating and cooling issues. They have mold issues. It's a code enforcement issue, but it's also, again, an availability. When you have units in need of repair, who's more likely to end up living in those units? And then keep in mind that we have a 15 to 20 year wait list on our voucher program, which means folks are out there fighting for units without any subsidy at all, trying to find what's available and affordable on the market. And we owe it to those families to try to invest money thoughtfully in how to keep these apartment complexes and other forms of housing livable. Next slide. And again, this is just a visualization of what we just showed. Let's go to the next one. Since we also have homeless services under our umbrella, I raise this repeatedly, not because it is a statistically overwhelming issue, but it's something that we really do need to keep an eye on. When I talked before about those 19,000 households in need of appropriately priced housing, I mentioned that folks already live here, and a large majority of them live in units that are much more expensive than what they should be paying at their respective income levels. We are also seeing concerning trends towards overcrowding. It's creeping, but it's creeping more and more, and we believe this is a vast undercount. So there are people obviously living in the county where their kids go to school, where they have their jobs, maybe where they grew up near their family support structures, that are living in doubled and tripled up units. I know there's been a lot of talk lately about college rentals and too many people. This is a not as talked about issue where the folks that are looking for housing are already here. Their children in these situations may already be attending those schools. That's not often factored into the discussions of school overcrowding, but it is a reality and it is growing over time. And if you notice, there is a statistically significant amount of severe overcrowding in home ownership units as well. Again, you have three choices. If you can't find housing that's appropriate for your income, you're living in a unit that is too expensive for you, you are living with someone else, or you are currently engaged with our homeless services system or another supportive structure that we offer. And we are seeing, it's not in here, but as an aside, if you compare this with our coordinated entry data, you are seeing a growing, steady number of families that when they call the hotline to report they have no housing, we always ask, where was your last housing? We are seeing all-time increases in the number of people who state my last housing was an apartment or a home, not coming from a shelter, not coming from the street. So that is the initial clue to us, a big red flag, that people are starting to fall through the bottom of that bubble that I was talking to you about earlier. Next slide. And again, this is just a graphic depiction of the overcrowding that you'll see in the assessment. Next slide. And then finally, there's an irony to this because one of the issues in the VCA was an accusation that the county was not aggressively seeking low-income housing tax credit projects. Like other counties, I think we're on the opposite end of the spectrum from a Montgomery County that's done a significant amount of low-income housing tax credit work over the years. And I say it's ironic because when the low-income housing tax credit program came into being, they had 40-year lifespans before the affordability would expire. You're seeing a lot of aggressive action on the bond sales market. A lot of low-income housing tax credit properties are slowly being bought by investors when their affordability expires and they're not being renewed as affordable development. This goes back to that preservation conversation. So it's very important that we monitor if we do have LIHTC projects in the county, when do they expire? And do we have a plan in place to support the ownership group to renew that affordability for another period of years to avoid it being sold and the affordability going away? We've seen that in a number of our low-income senior buildings where we have stepped in and made investments to places like Weinberg House and others to ensure that seniors can continue to pay an appropriate amount of rent that would be subsidized over time. We do not have anywhere close to the issue on this that other counties do, but there's still potentially 1,700 units at risk, and we have to constantly monitor and be aware of that as well. We can't afford to lose units in this environment is the bottom line. Next slide. And you can go right, that's just the visual. We'll go one more. So bottom line, which I think you've all gotten from this, we have a severe shortage of housing for our lowest income families. It's stress across the board, and it's going to have a bad impact on both sides of that bubble if we don't do something. The limited supply is further challenged by the mismatch in inventory. We talked quite a bit about that. We have a small toolbox, and I'm happy for the toolbox we have. We have a housing opportunity fund we didn't have before, but we don't have a tax that flows into that fund. We have been putting in a regular amount of general funds in the budget process. We've been getting back some program income, but that isn't an endless well of funding. We've been very successful in utilizing pilots or payment in lieu of tax agreements, particularly on the preservation side. And we've done our best to survive the volatility of the federal housing subsidy environment to continue to draw down funds. And I'm proud to say there has been at least one low-income housing tax credit award to a project in Baltimore County every year we've been in existence, and that's not a mistake. But there is going to be competition for limited resources. We will not be able to loan or grant our way out of this just through county resources alone. We're going to have to find bigger, more complex solutions to this to meet the 19,000 and the 12,000 new residents that aren't even encompassed in that number. And then next slide and final slide. These are things we're essentially pursuing now, and you're all probably fairly informed of most of these. But again, pilots, our opportunity fund, state and federal resources. We've noticed over the last few years, philanthropy, the Weinberg Foundation and others have been much more active in supporting projects in the county, which we're proud of. We also have to target some of our investments to aging housing stock preservation, and we cannot forget about homeownership. We have to continue to look and see at our financial tools and policy tools. We know there are neighborhoods full of potential starter home level housing where the folks living there may be stuck, unable to move to their next level of housing, but also we're seeing a greater increase in maybe not big investors, but investor owners looking to convert those housings to rental. That is based in part upon a lack of apartment inventory. It's what you see happening all over. If there's no apartments available and you have big single family homes and there's a market to grab them, those instantly become 3-4 bedroom rentals because the math works for the folks that want to do that type of business. We are not proposing strategies that focus solely on that 30% or below AMI. We believe if we focus efforts roughly in the middle, the missing middle discussions, smaller unit size, small multifamily townhomes, multiplexes, smaller lots, coupled with smart multifamily investment, particularly in areas like public-owned land around transit. There's been a lot of discussion of these. These are things we believe could work here. But as I said to the council, as I'm sure most of you already know, so I'm preaching to the choir, one of the biggest impediments to housing in the county is the uncertainty of the development process. And cost equals uncertainty, or uncertainty equals cost. And when we have a master plan that lays out nodes, places that development should be targeted, we have to have some agreement in the beginning about where we're going to direct these resources. What I'm seeing from my angle is developers are scouring the county, either working with us or on their own, to try to find anything they can purchase without too much of a fight. And that is no way to develop a solid housing strategy where we make housing accessible for different types of people across the entire county. We just have to be more strategic, and that's certainly not something DHCD can or should do alone. But mixed affordability models, the prior county executive was very much against large, low-income developments. And to be honest, they're not a great cost model either. There's ways to spread affordability throughout the county, and by the way, this also includes affordability for accessible housing. We have a much more acute need for wheelchair accessible housing that also happens to be affordable at different levels, and that'll be a different presentation. But starting with data, starting with collaboration, starting with real community and elected official conversations about the need, and starting from there is, I think, the only way we're going to hopefully approach this in a manner where we're not constantly at war over the where, the when, and the how, and we can start to move forward a bit. But with that, I will stop, and I'll thank you. That's a lot of information, but I appreciate you giving me the time to download it all to you, and I'll do my best with any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to well, as I said when I contacted you before, I'm really happy that the county has gone ahead and done this assessment, and I thank you for sharing the results with us. Director Hickey knows that I have a whole bunch of questions that I'm going to hold off on for the moment. Do any other board members have questions, issues they'd like to raise?
I have a question.
Ms. Brophy?
How are you, Director Hickey? It's good to see you.
You too.
Question. So I know in the beginning you said this is, purely metrics and it's not, a guide for implementation or anything. What are kind of your thoughts on next steps in reference to the different partners that could be involved in actually implementing some of the potential actions that you've outlined in there?
So this is going to sound overly simplistic, but one of the big next steps was actually engaging in conversations with people with the capacity to build or renovate housing. We weren't having those conversations at all. And in fact, most folks were convinced that the county couldn't or wouldn't support. So what we've done for the last 3 years is show that it's possible and show that we can get some developments through council without fights. Now, those were carefully selected projects. We don't have unlimited funds, and we can only do pilots in this environment for so long. They're not necessarily controversial, but over time, that adds up to real tax loss. So we need to be thinking with the Department of Planning, with the Planning Board and the Council. I think this starts with a shared understanding of, and I hate to be overly simplistic, but do we agree there's a need? And that's not always been as easy as some folks might think. Do we agree there's a need? Do we agree on a basic approach? No large, very low income multifamily developments unless there's a special need or a special desire for the market to produce it. What does mixed income actually look like in the county, and where should we be targeting? Most places on the planet that are stuck, remember, we have very few geographic places in the county where you can even start to have this conversation. I think Master Plan 2030 laid out a number of those areas, and I think we've broken down into individualized discussions with different council members in different districts about what might work there, but what we haven't really had are countywide conversations on that topic. I don't know exactly how to make those happen overnight, but the theory is it's hard to take these 100 pages and say, nope, none of it's true. And we've had people calling us over the last month that have been very, very cynical about housing, that have started to say, wait, but what if we could do it this way? And so I guess next steps are, I need to be cognizant as we go into a new administration, what funding sources are we going to bring to the table under a strategy? Is there a political will to continue to fund the Housing Opportunities Fund? What is our long-term plan going to be for pilots? What can the county budget sustain? Because we have to come and say, here's what we're going to do. We have to make the rules clear for developers on, if you look to do a project in this area, here are the tools, here's the way we can support, here's the expectations, and you won't get an unexpected fight. That's the one we got to work on.
Okay, and just as a follow-up to that, is there any collaboration? Obviously, Governor Westmore's come out obviously heavily on housing. And is there any type of collaboration between the state and counties and municipalities in reference to housing and kind of a statewide master plan? Simplistically.
I tend to be really, I'm blunt when I answer these. And so we have a governor that truly believes in housing. We have a housing secretary that really believes in housing. We have counties that, for a variety of reasons, are not showing progress. And it's not as easy as saying they don't want to. We're in an interesting position where the need is continuing to grow. It's frustrating people at the state level, but the answers at the local level are much more complex. And I think what we're seeing is, if you track the legislation over the last couple of years, it's a mishmash of, we want to pass this to help you. We're going to pass this to make it easier. We're going to pass this and hope you take advantage of it. Or we're going to think about passing this and make you do it. Or give the developers the right to push it. The concern with that is, if there's really no political will at the local level and you change lot size, there were people testifying against the starter silver home legislation because they're worried that you'll get smaller, denser McMansions, not starter homes. And I want to say this right. The pressure is important. The governor's executive order that provides incentives for us to do this is helpful. The governor's attempt to remove obstacles at the state level. Where are permitting and development plans getting stuck at the state level? And the executive order would pick somebody in every named agency that would be a point person for helping keep local development moving quicker. But I'm worried that legislation meant to change things and trickle down won't have the desired effect, because you know how complicated these development processes really are. What I'm hoping is we can agree to say, we see what you're trying to do, but we should probably do this at the local level. Is there a way in Baltimore County that we can start with goals on how we want to grow and where? And then what are initial land use and zoning changes that can be made? We're going to have to do something that impacts density and land use, something. Where do we do it? How do we do it? How do the planners go along with it? Because we have to do good planning, but increase density in reasonable ways that doesn't scare everybody. And so I think that I'm just going to answer it this way, Emily. The state keeping the pressure on is forcing the conversation, but I'm going to give props. We have an amazing, that our master plan is quoted at the state level every time this comes up because it started to chart the path, but you got to use the plan to get down the path. So we got the goods. We got the need. And then I'm not going to get myself in trouble. I'll stop there.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Mr. Hinton?
Hey, Director Hickey, I appreciate the information, and as always, I appreciate you telling us what the real issue is without telling us. Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is the local leaders do know that there is a need. The problem is that a small part of their constituency is speaking out against them, right? And the unfortunate part is typically that constituency already has their house in the woods. So, and they're trying to preserve what's around them, rightfully so. But the reality is the thousands of other residents that are voting aren't getting what they need. One thing that I found interesting about the data, I think it was towards the suggestions, and you mentioned it a few times about going to these smaller, denser lots. From what I can see from a real estate perspective, that's already happening, right? There are, 4,000 and 5,000 square foot homes, and there you can touch them when they're single families. The whole state of Maryland feels like a big townhouse at this point. Everything that we build is a townhouse. So, I mean, I saw that as a suggestion, but I feel like we're already doing that. The other thing, and I know I'm saying a lot, so forgive me. The apartments thing, I do think is interesting, and that I do think that is something that we could do better with. And not just building apartments, but building condos. Like we build a lot of apartments, but we don't build condos. And I know it's a lot more rules and a little bit more difficult when you get to that. But I do think for older people, they want to age in place and they don't want to go to a retirement home. That's a perfect destination for them. I think to your point with folks not having kids, there's a lot of dinks, right? Dual income, no kids. A condo or a nice, low maintenance, high amenity value place is something that they would look into. But I think the reality is most people do want to own something. And if we aren't building new housing for whatever reason, whether it's apartments, condos, townhouses, or single families, you said it, no one's going to be able to move up, right? And it's all a trickle down effect. If I can't move up to a new house, then someone can't. But I think the reason why I say that is sometimes when we look at these plans, to me, they feel too utopian, right? You're trying to build a solution for people that make $30,000 a year, in no disrespect, but it's just like when planes first come out, everyone couldn't afford a plane ticket or a train ticket, right? So we have to keep, building up so people can move up, so those other houses become more affordable that are still good housing stock. And yeah, I mean, I just think we have to stick to the plan. As you say, you get this master plan and then you start building houses and we don't stick to it because people get upset. But I think we don't do a good job of bringing in the supporting infrastructure such as schools and grocery stores and restaurants and things like that. You just build all these houses and people are like, well, what is this here for? And then even the people that buy the house, they don't want to stay there anymore because they don't get what they were promised. And I'll leave it at that. I don't want to continue to ramble, but that's kind of my thoughts.
You're so on, and I just want to make a couple things really clear to the board. And I know I want to get to other questions, but the condo idea has been coming up more and more in conversations, and there's some complexities to that. But we are starting to see models around the country of these smaller unit developments that aren't apartments, but are some version of small multifamily or towns where you can mix home ownership and rental in the same community. There's some things that would have to be worked through, but it certainly is possible. What I'm getting concerned about is I talked to Councilman Jones, who has sort of come around on this idea of townhomes, and it is a great middle ground, particularly at smaller It's smaller scale, higher density, if that makes sense. But we're seeing more and more development coming to, say, Hunt Valley, which in some ways would be a great spot for affordability because of the concentration of transit. But we're starting to see town communities, but these are $700,000-800,000 townhomes. So the townhomes are morphing into the McMansions of 10 years ago, just on a smaller footprint.
Can I piggyback off of that? Because
Yep.
I do agree. I mean, personally, I do live in a McMansion townhome, right? It's almost 4,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms, right? But that's what people, and I'll be like, my generation, the question is, why would you buy that version in a single family house when it's just, you have the same yard, right? From a financial standpoint, it'll be easier to rent that townhouse out versus a single family house in the future. So a lot of folks my age were like, hey, well, instead of buying the single family house to get, 2 extra feet in your backyard, let's just get the McMansion townhome, and you're just as fine. You don't have to cut the grass. It's even less maintenance because people want a maintainless society.
Right.
But yeah, I think I just find it interesting about the townhomes because I just feel like that's what everyone's doing. When you look at the builders, like if you talk, I'm sure you've talked to like MV and the developers, they're having meetings about building condos and townhomes, not single family homes, because the price of the lot to build is too expensive.
Right. The only other thing I'll add is because we've been defensive on housing and haven't had a strategy, it's a mishmash. So it happens much more quickly because, again, a developer finds a site, they see an opening, and then they'll come to us without a lot of planning. What that does is it always leaves the housing racing ahead of the infrastructure investment.
Mm.
And so part of the master plan idea, part of the idea of where are we going to do this is imagine if we could look 10, 20 years out and think, this is where schools are going. This is where we're going to do water sewer improvements. You want a new rec center. You're getting a new senior center. Housing comes with the plan. Housing isn't pitted against the infrastructure. Now, we have an immediate need, but we can address some of that through preservation, renovation of existing units that are falling out of repair. But if we can get long-term, and I could start to plan housing developments on the same curve as my colleague does water sewer investments that they're tracking through the capital budget, we could also address, because I'm never going to say to a community, your infrastructure concerns aren't real. But it's a constant cycle where infrastructure wins, housing loses, and then we don't progress, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate the insight.
Other questions, comments?
I have one, Scott.
Mr. Heckman?
Just curious, there's 110,000 units that are older than 1960, and by my math, that's 65 years old or something. Do we keep track of how many units actually become obsolete every year? I mean, they get to the point where you can't even repair them, either for code reasons or other reasons. Do we keep track of that? Because that would just make it even worse.
Well, you're right. I'll answer your question. We track it, but we could be doing it in a much more comprehensive way. We're required under the VCA to track subsidized units that have a low-income housing tax credit component. We also found a way to do this based on the time that units, like we can look at a multifamily and see the last time they pulled any permits for renovation or repair. And we were starting to do this, Steve. Remember way back in the beginning, we came into this with the VCA and there were no projects in the pipeline. And HUD was looking at us going, are you guys going to do something? And we started pulling all of the multifamily properties with no permits for at least 25 years. And we started sort of aggressively monitoring where they were in their life cycle. It was developments like that Dave Bramble ended up going after that led to that big deal that we did with the 3 units. So I will tell you, we do track. It's not fully comprehensive. Rex is involved in efforts to be more methodical about that. And we're actually trying, as we get more involved with the development community, since we don't have a right of first refusal law, we're trying to anticipate ahead of time what developments may be put on the market for sale, or where there may be such a code violation issue, that we can start to direct other resources. Because the other thing is, it's not just about the units. Councilmen are particularly reminding me about these large multifamily or townhome developments that are seriously out of repair, and that is people's idea of affordable housing. And that's not good for the planning either, if you know what I mean. So,
Correct.
yeah, but we can do better on this front, and I think it's something we need to get a little tighter on. But essentially, yes, we do.
Thank you. Great work.
Any other questions? I'm going to take an opportunity to ask one of my questions. I hope we get a chance to go through more of them.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm concerned about is the way the analysis was done. You know, we've heard from the comptroller's office and from some of the state reports, et cetera, that we know that the state of Maryland, the county, is losing. We have a lot of out-migration. And one of my concerns is that the way the analysis was done is it bakes in that out-migration. So you've got, you know, middle, upper income families who can't find the housing they want, businesses that can't find the land they want, they move away. And so you're left with an analysis that says, oh, we need a lot of smaller units. Well, there could be a market for lots of other units, but we're assuming that away. That a fair assessment of how this analysis was done?
So my analyst here is losing his voice. I warned him there was going to be one I was going to toss to him. So Rex, you wanna start on that one? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. So sorry about my voice. I'm gonna keep it quick, or try and keep it quick. Yeah, we did bake in the current out migration patterns in this. There's really I don't think we could think of another way to do it, but that was more in the full presentation. That has no effect. In theory, that has no effect on that 19,000 units that we need at the 30% level. For our projections going forward, which I don't think we really talked about much in this presentation here, but it's in the whole thing, we're projecting that we need about 12,000 households by 2037. So that projection is in there. We are baking in that we're not really growing. We're baking in that we've been losing residents to out-migration every year in the past 5 years. So if that trend reduced, we would end up needing more housing. So as of right now, we're projecting a smaller amount. It can only become greater. So while yes, what you're saying is right, I would say it's even more evidence to build more house, or even more of evidence of need of housing.
Oh, no, I'm not debating that. And I guess the other thing I wanted to ask, the way I was reading the report, we have the 18,000, almost 19,000 lower income units that we need to meet current demand. We haven't even talked about how many more sort of lower income households we may have going on, because that we know that's a growing number. Plus, we have 12,000 units of new households. So that if I add those two together, I'm now over 30,000 units. And is that an appropriate way to, and I say that in part because when some of the press came out, a lot of the press picked up on that 19,000.
Yeah.
But the state numbers, et cetera, are showing 50,000. Well, you start to add that 12,000, and if it's a low ball estimate, these are all getting within the same ballpark.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But I also think, as the guy who's got to at least offer ideas as we go through this process, we have to be careful not to kid ourselves into thinking the number's almost so big, Scott, that it becomes impossible to even kid ourselves that we can just solve that problem, right? I think we need to start making incremental progress towards, the market's going to do what the market's going to do. Some people are going to leave. Some people are going to try to come. We have a significant handicap in our lack of, and I'm not going near this conversation practically, but let's just say factually, there is a very large chunk of the county that we cannot develop in.
Have chosen not to develop in.
Yes, sir. And so that being the case, redevelopment and preservation becomes both an opportunity and a limiting factor. You know, we're not going to build massive housing to scale, and that's probably not the right thing anyway. There are thousands of people in this county that, God bless them, are making it work, but it's not the right way to do it. And we're clogging up units. There's this idea of housing movement, right? Like we talk about people of low income finding a unit, but in a good world, we don't want to find them a unit that they get stuck in for the rest of their lives. We want movement and motion. And we have homes in Hillendale where the people there are stuck, but those homes would sell for 275 to 325. So people here could go there. We didn't talk at all about the economic factors, but trying to work more with our economic development partners to think about wage growth and how housing is tied to business growth in the county, which is also fairly stagnant. But if we could start to take the pressure off the middle to allow some movement and growth, this is a great place. People want to build here. People want to live here. People want to thrive here. We got that going for us. I did a lot of work in the city where we didn't know what to do once we fixed up the row homes, what would happen. But if we could take a modest chunk, 5,000 units over the next few years, and have a plan to do it, I think organically we'd start to see some of the pressures come off. But yeah, it's a really big number.
Well, I think, like I said, I hope we still have a chance to, look at some of the other questions that I had. Mr. Hinton, you've got another question?
Real quick though, Scott, I got
Yeah.
your answers right here, and
Oh, great.
we're going to send them to you, and then I'm going to set up a call because I like how you think, and I want to talk to you and our assessment people about this some more. So come and send them.
Appreciate that.
You got it.
Mr. Hinton?
Yeah, really quickly, I was curious, do you guys have a state or states that you could model your plan after? I mean, I know every state has a housing crisis pretty much and somewhat different. I'm not saying go full Florida on us or anything like that, but do you have any states that you look at and say, hey, they're doing it the right way? We could take some lessons from them.
Yes is the short answer. They're all attacking it in different ways. And I think what's fascinating, and I can send you some interesting examples, and I'm headed to the National Association of Counties this weekend, their legislative conference in DC, when I have an opportunity to hear more. There's folks in very, very red districts in Idaho and the Midwest, Montana, Colorado, that made this a non-political issue and just said, we got to put some reality in here and give people a chance to get stuff done. And they did it with state support. So it's not really a red, blue, purple thing. It's kind of a where do you start and a mind. Good friend of mine that I worked on the NACO housing report with, she went from being a county councilwoman to the first female mayor of Miami. And she made her career by helping take land along the metro going up through Miami-Dade that was owned by the county and tearing out the old parking garages and asphalt and building beautiful mixed income housing. And they did it because they just did it. They just, and if you read the stories, like they just got everybody in a room and said, we're doing this, tell us why we're not. I get worried about fancy, like we really need, as much as I want to see change, and I want to be clear about this, we have to think about what would work in Baltimore County, right? And eradicating single family zoning overnight like they did in Minneapolis would have a Steve, we go into witness protection. We've started with things like an executive order where we have permissive inclusive housing, which is if you want to take a county benefit, if you want to do a pilot or take a loan, you have to agree to preserve a portion of your housing is affordable for a certain period of time, and we'll help you pencil it. We have to look at these small scale densifications, like the small multifamily. Would single staircase multifamily be as controversial here as it is in the city? I don't know. But there are avowed housing opponents emailing me articles about single stair multifamily saying, maybe this is a good idea because it's not that giant multifamily that they don't want. So I gave you a long answer. The short answer is there's all these models because everybody has this problem. We can do a laundry list of things, but there has to be buy-in here, or else I don't want to make a policy decision that ends up driving developers away or ends up in a bad development decision. And I know Pete, or I know Steve at planning will never let us do this, that ends up with bad communities with more housing, right? Like I don't want to be the guy that's thought of as, well, we got more housing, but it looks like Staten Island now. So it's where my wife is from. I get to say that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yes. Yeah, I would hope similar to what Scott had said earlier, there's some land that can be built on. It's just chosen not to, and hopefully we can get that done one day.
So again, thank you very much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I don't know, if and when you plan to do the sort of the next iteration of data collection, but I hope that we can continue this discussion. As you said, a lot of these issues will play into sort of planning issues, and to the extent that I think a lot of members of the planning board are interested in continuing to have these sorts of discussions. So I hope we can continue that.
That's great. Thank you for all the time you gave us. And I will put this invitation out. Any individual member of the planning board, either you have a constituency, you're part of an organization, a community association. If you want me and my team to come out and have this conversation with you there, I think we win by talking about it. Sometimes talk is good if it leads to action. And have me back anytime and reach out to me individually if you have questions about the assessment or our work, and we'll get right back to you. But thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Bensley will now fill us in on the major activities of the February 12th Landmarks Preservation Commission meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At their February 12th, 2026 meeting, the Landmarks Preservation Commission voted to issue one certificate of appropriateness to the following property: the Phoebus property located at 1535 South Rolling Road in Halethorpe, and that concludes the report.
Thank you. And you will now fill us in on legislation recently passed by the County Council following our last meeting.
Thank you again. This one's a little longer. Bill 9525 zoning regulations, downtown Towson district tree replacement, for the purpose of requiring that the planting of trees to replace trees which are removed for any development located in a certain commercial revitalization district are subject to certain county and state requirements and generally relating to the DT overlay district. Bill 9625 zoning regulations, nonconforming dwelling units, for the purpose of permitting certain nonconforming dwelling unit uses in a building based upon the continuous use of the dwelling units for a certain period of time, exempting certain areas from the provisions of this act and generally relating to dwelling units and nonconforming uses. Bill 9725, government reorganization, Office of Immigrant Affairs, for the purpose of establishing an Office of Immigrant Affairs, defining certain terms, establishing the purposes and duties of the office, establishing a chief of immigrant affairs who shall lead the office, establishing certain annual reporting requirements, requiring a report be submitted to the county executive and council regarding certain consolidation of budgets and positions, and generally relating to the Office of Immigrant Affairs. Bill 326 zoning regulations, data center study. This is the bill that Director Lafferty mentioned at our last board meeting, for the purpose of restating certain definitions, establishing temporary controls, suspending the permitting of data centers until a certain date, requiring the planning board to conduct a general review of data center permitting in Maryland, assess the average public utility usage of data centers, compare such utility usage to other permitted uses of a similar size, and submit a report to the County Council no later than October 1st, 2026 that contains certain recommendations, providing for the retroactive application of this act to the date of this act's introduction, and generally relating to data centers. Bill 4-26.
Mr. Chairman, Taylor, before you go on, because I unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to leave for a town hall budget meeting, but regarding that specific bill, the board, as of now, we're putting together an internal agency team to look at this issue, knowing that while the planning board has a lot of expertise, it may not be in the realm of data centers. And the intent of this juncture is for the planning board, to schedule a planning board public input meeting, perhaps in late May, to take public comment, generate a report that then is presented to the planning board, perhaps in July for a public hearing and vote in September. So the planning board will be actively involved, and certainly before that, as requested last time, I will bring you up to speed on where we are on our own research and the other activities that are taking place. But we do expect the planning board to have an active role in the approval of any report that goes back to the county council. So I just wanted to insert that, and I apologize, Taylor, for cutting you off, but
No,
I need to get to Catonsville. So
I understand.
okay, great.
no problem
you.
at all.
Thank you.
Bill 4-26 zoning regulations, density residential use regulations in existing developments for the purpose of amending the Baltimore County zoning regulations in order to clarify the county council's intent regarding certain existing or proposed developments in the DR zone with respect to any lot which is in a recorded residential subdivision approved by the Baltimore County Planning Board or Planning Commission and which has been used, occupied, or improved in accordance with the approved subdivision plan and generally relating to existing or proposed developments in the DR zone. And finally, Resolution 426, designation of Pikesville as a sustainable community, a resolution of the Baltimore County Council to support the designation of the community of Pikesville as a sustainable community for approval either directly by the Department of Housing and Community Development of the State of Maryland or through the Smart Growth Subcabinet of the State of Maryland. And that concludes the report.
Thank you very much. I know Director Lafferty had to leave. I don't know if anybody else on the call right now knows. I thought I'd heard that the small area plan that we approved and submitted to the council a few months ago, that there were some amendments. Does anyone know exactly what those amendments were, if they've been passed, or is it still in process?
Chairman Halupka, it was passed this past week. The resolution is online. There was a list of about 12 amendments. So we're working internally to make those amendments to the document and get it posted online. So maybe by the end of this week, well, maybe that's Friday. Tomorrow's Friday, so maybe next week, but pretty soon we'll have them up.
Okay.
So that there were some amendments, some specific amendments around Lafarge, and some other items. But they are, if you go to the council page and you look at the resolution, they're listed.
Okay, so we could see what
You can see it, yep, until we get a chance to get it updated.
I mean, particularly since that was the first one and there'll be more
Right.
coming down the pipe, so.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
All right, that is the conclusion of our agenda, unless we have any other questions or comments. We will adjourn this meeting and then immediately convene for our CIP subcommittee meeting. This meeting will be on the same WebEx. Do I have a motion to adjourn the board meeting?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I'm gonna jump right into the
Yep.
CIP meeting then. Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Brophy, and I'm the chair of the Planning Board Subcommittee on the Capital Improvement Budget and Program. I would like to acknowledge the committee members present with us this evening. When you hear your name, please say aye. Mr. Array,
Aye.
Mr. Brady,
Aye.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Ms. German,
Aye.
Mr. Halupka,
Aye.
Mr. Heckman, Mr. Heinel,
Aye.
Mr. Hinton,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Miss Lilly, Miss Muneses,
Aye.
Miss Pinero,
Aye.
Mr. Schulman,
Aye.
and Mr. Tennant.
Aye.
Thank you. Tonight, we are meeting in a work session to hear staff recommendations from the Department of Planning regarding the capital improvement budget and program. After staff's presentation, members of the committee will have the opportunity to ask questions, and then the subcommittee will vote. Before we begin the presentation, I want to note that I know there are members of the community in attendance of tonight's meeting. This meeting has not been designed to accept comments from citizens. The Planning Board held a citizen input meeting on October 16th, 2025, which was the opportunity for the board to hear from citizens on their issues concerning the capital improvement program. I would like to invite staff from the Department of Planning to go ahead and begin their presentation.
Good evening, members of the board. Tonight, planning staff will review the capital budget for fiscal year 27 and the capital program for fiscal year 28 through 32. Staff has reviewed the budget as prepared by the agencies. The director of the budget office sets the target limits for each agency and their capital projects. The agency then prepares the budget for the upcoming fiscal year and the following 5 years that fall within the limits set by the budget office. We have found that the funding amounts have not increased or decreased, nor have funding sources changed from the adopted fiscal year 26 budget. Staff would now like to review with the planning board citizen input meeting requests that were made in order to summarize the agency responses to those requests. Austin Broderick will begin with reviewing the sewer system request, and I'm going to share my screen.
Hello, good evening, everyone. The first request is from the Bay Country Homeowners Association, requesting that the county take ownership of the Bay Country wastewater pumping station from the developer. The DPWT's response is that the county does not take ownership of privately owned pumping stations. And then the next one for the water system, there are two from Manor Shopping Center requesting money for a feasibility study to serve Jacksonville commercial area with well water. This request is moving through the annual water and sewer cycle amendment process. And then from the West Twin Rivers community, requesting the replacement of an aging water main that has caused numerous issues in recent years, including property damage, flooding, and water quality, based on the model that the department uses to prioritize water main replacements. This is not a top priority at the moment, and it will be reevaluated once new data is available.
Hello. My section is with storm drains, green infrastructure, streets and highways are pretty long, so bear with all these comments here. For storm drains, Ruxton, Riderwood, Lake Roland area, significant issues have been raised regarding rainwater not being retained upstream at Lake Roland Park and its subsequent effects on the park. DPWT said evaluation of projects in this drainage area will continue as previously scheduled, so they already have it under consideration. Request for the same area, requesting a stormwater management plan for the intersection of Ruxton and Circle Roads and subsequent funding. Roland Run is a large drainage area and will continue. DPWT will continue to evaluate projects within portions of the drainage area. For Clark's Point Road, repaving and flood control, requesting the repaving of flood control of Clark's Point Road, more specifically in the 3700 block for flood control. This road's located within the 100 years tidal floodplain of Chesapeake Bay. The only option is a new egress located outside of 100 years tidal floodplain, which would take significant advocacy from community members to push forward. So if they want that, they just suggest community members do push forward on that. For green infrastructure, thanks, Jen. Catonsville Rails to Trails requests an increase of SIP allocations for bicycle, pedestrian, and train infrastructure in both streets and highways and parks preservation and greenway classifications. DPWT said this request will be taken into consideration. Note that they receive $1.4 million every other year for bike ped access throughout the county. Delaney, the next one is for Delaney Valley Road Crossing. Request footbridge from Valley Garth to Lock Raven Reservoir Trails. This portion of Delaney Valley Road is state-owned. Request would need to be forwarded to the District 4 office. Next, for Road to Freedom Trail, request that funding for trail be dedicated to prioritized for pedestrian and cyclist improvements along proposed trail route. Oh yes. Department has been coordinating with the advocacy group for trail improvements. So they are working on that. Hazelwood Park East Community Association requests that the Hazel Avenue Revitalization Project expand its boundaries to the east to include Freedom Church area. Requests multiple necessary aspects, including lighting and traffic calming measures within that corridor, specifically across the skate park. Oh, I was told I skipped one. Oh, Gwen's Falls Restoration and Promenade. Sorry, I'll come back to that after Hazelwood. So this was a little bit of a long one. There's no light that can be put in across from the skate park because there's a BGE substation and across the street from there, and they restrict having any street lights in front of that substation. So the Rec and Parks also doesn't place lighting outside of parks to deter usage after closing hours at dusk. The department is working with BGE to reinstall a 150 LED pendant at the upgraded utility pole. I have the number if you would like it. Should be noted, DPWT's office has addressed the same complaint by upgrading 4 lights along this section of Hazelwood Avenue in 2024. The comment about the upgraded utility pole is that the utility pole was upgraded, but they didn't upgrade the light, so they have to continue doing that. Going back to Gwen's Falls Restoration and Promenade, requesting restoration and enhancement of Gwen's Falls Waterway and establishing a continuous pedestrian promenade connecting Gwen Oak Park to Woodlawn Village. There was no specific comment on this request from the department. I think that this specific comment also came into later down in streets and highways, and I think that team did make a comment on that. So I'll get back to that in the next couple slides. Okay, moving on to Linover, I think that's how you say it, Linover Improvement Association, requesting traffic calming measures to be installed in the neighborhood, as well as sidewalks, crosswalks, and streetlights. These requests for traffic calming need to be applied for via the online application, and DPWT just provided what emails to reach out to. It would be traffic NG at Baltimore County, Maryland, and sidewalk requests can be forwarded to sidewalk connectivity at baltimorecountymaryland.gov. Ruxton, Riderwood, Lake Roland Area Improvement Association again, requesting crosswalk across Charles Street at Stevenson Lane with a sidewalk to allow access north to Woodbrook Lane and Lake Roland Park's pedestrian entrance. This is also a state-operated and maintained intersection, so requests should be forwarded to District 4 MDOT SHA, State Highway Association. So that's for green infrastructure and storm drains. And then streets, highways, and transportation had the most comments from citizens at the CIM. So this will be a long list. Let me hop over. Okay. So first we have Ruxton Riderwood again, asking for $500,000 capital request to allow for construction of a sidewalk and a crosswalk at Stevenson Lane at Charles Street. As of March 2023, the planning board required this to be incorporated into community plan for area. This was also DPWT. They said Charles Street is a state route under the jurisdiction of MDOT State Highway Association, and as such requires coordination with MDOT to facilitate this request. For Linover Improvement, requesting sidewalks get completed within Linover community, multiple unfinished curb cuts and sidewalks. DPWT mentioned sidewalk improvements were evaluated under the sidewalk connectivity program and passes initial threshold of program. Project will be further evaluated to determine funding. For Ebenezer Road between Pulaski Highway and Route 7, requesting $2.1 million to make utilities improvements to help pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic on the aforementioned road. Ebenezer. This request will be reviewed and further evaluated for needs, feasibility, and funding requirements. And that was their response for the next Ebenezer Road comment as well. Looks like they were similar requests anyways. Moving down to Hazelwood East Community District pedestrian ramps on the east and westbound corners of Amelia Avenue and Hazelwood Avenue. Ramps need to be updated to meet current standards. When this is done, repaving will also be done. So I guess it's on their list. Clark's Point Road repaving, requesting the repaving of road and flood control measures to be added, particularly in the 3700 block. Based on the department's model for measuring need and priority roads, this stretch of road is not a top priority for the department's current allocation of funding. Bosley Road, request for curbs and sidewalks along mentioned road in Cockeysville. This request is being evaluated for potential inclusion into the sidewalks connectivity program. For Darley Road, request the complete repaving of road. Inadequate attempts of patching road have been made in past, and for Red Lion Road repaving, similar request. They had a similar answer of based on the department's model for measuring need and priority roads. This stretch of road is not a top priority for the department's current allocation of funding. Moving on to Cross Road to East Joppa Road and Chapel Road, requesting the addition of sidewalks to mentioned road. Request will be evaluated for potential inclusion in the sidewalk connectivity program. Next page to Knollwood Association Board of Directors, request to prioritization of repaving Knollwood, Donnybrook neighborhood roads. BGE is currently performing work in this area and plans to repair and complete areas of paving restoration by the end of the calendar year, weather permitting. For Old Frederick Road from the traffic circle at Edmondson Avenue toward North Rolling Road, request the extension of the sidewalks on both sides of the before mentioned road. Sidewalk in the vicinity of Old Frederick Road. Oh, this is DPWT's comment, sorry. Sidewalk in the vicinity of Old Frederick Road and Edmondson Avenue has been evaluated under the sidewalk connectivity program and was determined not to be a good candidate due to overall length of needs and available ROW. The project will be evaluated for separate project funding during the county budget process. Orchard Hills Road, request complete repaving of road. Most recent repairs were done in 2001. Based on department's model to measure need and priority, this road is not a top priority for repair or use of available funding. And then down to Pikesville Improvement Corporation. Request installation of sidewalks along Sudbrook Lane from Clarendon Avenue to Reisterstown Road, as well as the installation of ADA compliant pedestrian crossings. There's a capital project for sidewalk along the southbound side of Sudbrook from Clarendon Avenue to Reisterstown Road. The project is in preliminary design. Reisterstown Road is a state route. Coordination with MDOT SHA is necessary for any improvements requested along state routes. Rolling Oaks. No. We skipped Pikesville pedestrian safety is not on this slide. It looks like it's okay. It's okay, Jen. I'll come back to it if I find it. Rolling Oaks HOA. Request funding for final phase of Rolling Road capital improvements, including ADA compliant sidewalks, road widening, and stormwater upgrades. This request will be reviewed and further evaluated for needs, feasibility, and funding requirements. And here's Gwen Falls Restoration and Promenade, which was mentioned earlier, requesting restoration and enhancement of the waterway and establishing a continuous pedestrian pathway connecting to Gwen Oak Park. Department made no specific comment on citizen input other than that the repainting of crosswalks and lane markings are performed on a cyclical basis. White Marsh pedestrian improvements, requesting accessible curb ramps along Beaconsfield Drive, completion of the Northeast Trail along Perry Hall Boulevard, and sidewalks along Honeygo Boulevard from Perry Hall Boulevard to White Marsh Boulevard. Requests for exact location curb ramps can be sent to the traffic NG email. The Northeast Trail is currently at 65% design, progressing to 90% design level. Requests for sidewalk can also be submitted to highway design, and larger sidewalk requests should be requested through the usual county budgeting process. And the department also urges residents to bring up the sidewalk need to their respective council person. They were also able to identify 6 locations on Honeygo Boulevard with missing sidewalks, and will investigate and score each location under the guidelines of the sidewalk connectivity program, and can provide follow-up responses when completed. For that one, they did ask for contact for the community member who made that comment. Next one is which one? White Marsh Traffic, requesting that traffic be rerouted from rural roads, including Route 7, Ebenezer Road, and Cowanton Road, to non-rural roads, including Route 43, Route 40, and I-95. Scroll down here. While the request has been understood by the department, restricting or rerouting traffic is not plausible for the county due to the roads being public roads. Cromwell Valley Park. Oh, okay. Now we're on to general government buildings. So that was all streets. It was a lot of comments going on there for streets. So general government buildings. Let me open that now. Cromwell Valley Park Council, stabilization and restoration of several buildings within Cromwell Valley Park. Property management will evaluate the possibility for requesting future funding for the Merrick Barn stabilization and other structures. This request will be balanced with other competing priority projects. Liberty Senior Center, new senior center requested. The department will take this request into consideration when formulating future capital requests by reviewing programming needs and senior center data while balancing against other priorities. Cockeysville Senior Center, parking situation needed to be addressed, and request the removal of no parking signs. I think it was Cockeysville Senior Center that had multiple citizen comments. The citizens kept referring to it as the center, but I'm pretty sure that they all referred to Cockeysville Senior Center here. And the department will discuss internally to assess the feasibility of extending operating hours. That was one request. Another request was also parking be updated to include area next to the pickleball courts. Let me see, I'm getting these confused over here because there were multiple. During design, the department with the consultants viewed many options for the expansion of parking to determine the most feasible solution. And for the no parking signs during design, same answer. Okay, and then Owings Mills Rise and Thrive Center requests that a center for school-aged children offering tutoring and homework help after school, mental health support, and family resources is built. This one was a little, we got an answer from Matt Carpenter of Office of Budget and Finance. He said that he'd assumed that this was not directly addressed by any single agency in templates because it's a conglomeration of services listed below offered in a single facility, would be best addressed by several agencies and would seem to include elements from BCPS, Health, DSS, and even Rec and Parks. Such a facility has not at this time been contemplated. The county would need to review and assess, taking into consideration of ongoing capital needs and resources currently available. Oh, and one more came up that didn't make it onto the slide before we got this finalized, but Randallstown Aquatic Center, locker rooms, there was a community request for locker rooms saying they are inadequate for current usage and need to be expanded. And property management said that during fiscal year 25, funding was allocated for a concept and schematic design for improvements to the Randallstown Swim Center locker rooms and pool bleacher area. The rough order magnitude estimate at 30% amounted to over $3.1 million, but that's a placeholder price because the price will continue to go up, and no current construction funding is programmed at this time. Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of requests from the Parks Preservation and Greenways category. And the first was for new disc golf courses. Maintenance of existing courses will continue with enhancements at Silver Creek Park expected to be completed soon, and some low-cost projects to add disc golf courses to Reisterstown Regional Park. That's presently budgeted, and additionally a larger capital project to develop the long dormant Days Cove Park, and creating a woodlands disc golf course and other amenities was previously budgeted and is underway. Cromwell Valley Park just had given you an answer for that in the government building section. For the Overly Fullerton community improvements, they were requesting improvements in their local parks of Linover, Fullerton, and Double Rock Park and Holt Park. All of these identified parks have or are currently experiencing capital projects that are renovating them and improving them. Holt Park in particular is being significantly improved through a substantial investment of funds secured through multiple state grant programs. For the Reisterstown Improvement Association, they asked for funds to create the Woodley Avenue Park. The design and construction for that park is expected to begin in this present fiscal year and leveraging existing POS funds. For the Reisterstown Kiwanis Club, they're requesting $35,000 to assist in creating a small children's playground in the area. Rec and Park said that they'll continue the conversation with the community. This is not in their budget, and that they think that the $35,000 would not get very far for a playground. For Silver Creek Park, they're requesting installation of some playground equipment and some seating for adults. And that playground is not currently on the list of proposed playground replacements, but other playgrounds in the area have been identified and recently have had replacements done to those parks. The park is heavily used as a disc golf park, and Rec and Parks will continue to meet with the community about updating the disc golf course and improving that course. They're planning to post information on their Capitol website and install a sign on the site to direct people to provide input. Also, upgrades to the nearby playgrounds, such as like Scotts Hill Playground was replaced in 2024, and Sudbrook Park Playground is scheduled this summer.
There was only one comment regarding schools, and that was the Pikesville High School Comfort Station. Request was put in for additional funding to cover the increased construction costs. Schools responded by saying that a project design was completed, but due to the increased construction estimate, the funding was inadequate to proceed to bidding. The requester's decision at that time was to put the original design on hold until supplemental funds were found. As this project was proposed and funded with state grants and does not directly impact the student curriculum, BCPS is unwilling to fund the overage and construction costs in the capital program. The project is currently on hold until additional funds are secured.
Okay, for the Ag Preservation Program, there was a request to increase the funding for both the Rural Legacy Program and the Agricultural Preservation Program. So planning has maintained the bond authorization at $6 million as previously budgeted for the land preservation projects, and maintained a $900,000 biannual amount for the County Rural Legacy Program. For community improvements, we did have quite a bit of request here. The Essex Community Development Corporation requested some funding for a property in Essex to be transformed into a shared commercial kitchen. This request amount was too large for a community improvement grant. There was another one, I think the Natural History Museum, where their request was also too large, and they were made aware of that request being too large. The Hazelwood Business Quarter improvement requests gateway signage, and the gateway signage is eligible for grant money, but a request has not been made from the community. Planning will follow up with the community to encourage them to apply for the May round of funding. For the Pikesville Revitalization Action Plan, they requested funding for public art. They currently have capital funds that are unspent. For the Reisterstown Improvement Association, the request to support to buy the property at 234 Main Street to become like the permanent home of the Reisterstown Improvement Association. We haven't gotten a specific request from them, so planning will follow up with them. For the Security Woodlawn Business Association, they were requesting funding to help Woodlawn transition through the re-imaging Security Square Mall project, and that is an operational budget request and not a capital request.
Hi. For waterway improvement, there were just two requests. The first one was the Gwynns Falls restoration of just the general restoration and enhancement of the waterway. That was included in the budget for the proposed budget. And then for Lake Roland, they're dealing with some flooding from upstream tributaries, subsequently causing flooding in the Lake Roland Park. And again, there are multiple funds that have been allocated for stormwater restoration and retrofit in the proposed budget for that project. And then for operational buildings, specifically the police, they had a request of less than $200,000 to purchase 50 solar-powered mobile speed monitoring devices to then be dispersed into 5 devices per precinct to kind of put wherever they feel they need to. And again, there are countywide funds for additions to county police precincts that have been included in the proposed budget.
So that concludes our presentation. If anybody has any questions, we can try to answer those for you.
Thank you, planning staff. Does anyone from the board have questions? If you do, please raise your hand. Ms. Meneses?
Yes, my question is for Austin Broderick. It's at the beginning of the presentation, but what was the DPW's response to the feasibility request for a feasibility study for a water well at Manor Shopping?
At Manor Shopping.
Yeah.
They said that it sort of dovetailed with a similar request from the same individual, and that request is moving through the annual water and sewer cycle amendment process.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Not seeing any. We're going to move on to our subcommittee vote. So I just want to let the board members know that we have multiple classes that we're going to vote on. I know, Mr. Heckman, you already said that you wanted to separate one of them. I'm just going to run down them really quickly. And if anybody wants to separate any of the classes, feel free to let me know. 201 is sewer system, 203 is water, 204 is storm drains, 205 is street and highways, 207 is bridges, culverts, and grade separations, 208 refuse disposal, 209 community college, 210 operational buildings, 212 parks preservation and greenways, 213 schools, 217 land preservation, 218 community improvements, 220 operational buildings, 221 waterway improvement fund, and 230 operational buildings. Is there anyone that wants to separate out any class for further discussion? I know, Mr. Heckman, you want to separate out schools, which is 213, which we will. Mr. Brady, you have your hand up. Did you have a question? I apologize if I missed it, or did you need to separate out a class?
I wanted to ask a question about the Randallstown Senior Center, which was proposed when they asked for $15 million for a new senior center. I wanted to know what the disposition of that was.
I'm just looking for it again. 1 second. Randallstown Senior Center. We had a senior center for Liberty Senior Center come up, and
Yeah, that's the. I'm saying. Yeah, that's the one. Liberty Senior Center. Yes.
oh, okay, the request for the new center, correct?
Yes.
Deep Property Management said that they'll take this request into consideration when formulating future capital requests by reviewing programming needs and senior center data while balancing against other priorities.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to separate any classes? Okay, so then if there's no other requests, I'm going to entertain a motion. So if you want to go ahead and state the motion, and then I'm gonna basically separate everything, but so this will be the motion for all classes but schools. So Taylor, do I need to read them all out, or am I good just to like say the ones that I just said?
I will defer to Ms. Meacham on that one.
You can say every
Because I said them.
Everything
you can
but
say every
213.
department, but yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure because I kind of
Yeah.
already said them. So thank you.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Scott.
Be it moved that the Baltimore County Planning Board Committee on the Capital Budget and Program agrees with the staff recommendations to accept the proposed budget for the Stage 1 proposed FY27 budget and FY28 to FY32 program for all programs except for 213 schools.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call. When I call your name, please say aye or nay. Mr. Array,
Yes.
Mr. Brady, Mr. Brady.
Aye.
Thank
Aye.
you. Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Ms. German,
Aye.
Mr. Heckman,
Aye.
Mr. Heinel, Mr. Hinton,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Miss Lilly, Miss Meneses,
Aye.
Miss Pinero,
Aye.
Mr. Schulman,
Aye.
Mr. Tennant.
Aye.
And then I'm going to say aye also because obviously Mr.
And I
Tennant
vote
took the
aye as well.
motion. So thank you. So the motion carries. This is the conclusion of our vote. This also concludes. Go ahead, Scott.
We now need to do the 213.
Oh, yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Be it moved that the Baltimore County Planning Board Committee on the Capital Budget and Program agrees with the staff recommendations to accept the proposed budget for the Stage 1 proposed FY27 budget and FY28 to FY32 program for number 213 county schools.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call again, and this is specifically for 213 schools. Mr. Array,
Aye.
Mr. Brady,
Aye.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Ms. German,
Aye.
Mr. Heckman.
I need to recuse myself for this vote.
Thank you. Mr. Heinel, Mr. Hinton,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Miss Lilly, Miss Meneses,
Aye.
Miss Pinero, Miss Pinero.
I'm here. Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Schulman,
Aye.
Mr. Tennant.
Aye.
And then I am an aye, and obviously so is Mr. Halupka, so the motion carries. That is now the conclusion of our
Uh,
vote. Go ahead, Scott.
Still not quite yet. The other part that we have is if extra funds become available, does the CIP committee want to request funding to be provided for any additional projects?
So you'd like to add that as a motion?
Well, I guess we need to discuss it.
Okay, so planning board members before the meeting, I think, was it earlier today, Scott? That you sent out that letter? By
I
email?
sent it out for the transmittal, and so that's
Yes.
one thing. So yeah, my recommendation at that is that that even more strongly worded than we did last year, that as we heard in multiple presentations, we have backlogs in a number of projects and areas. And so I want to recommend that we prioritize capital needs in both the current on filling in the backlog of projects across the board over the construction of any new facilities or projects.
Did the planning board members have a chance, because Mr. Luca looks like he sent it out yesterday afternoon.
Yep.
Did all the committee members have a opportunity to read that correspondence that we sent last year and have any questions about that? Because I think, Ms. Mante, if I'm right, you guys helped us draft that last year and would have to do something similar this year.
Yeah, we draft the transmission letter, so
Okay.
that goes to the county executive, so we can draft it and then you can re-review it.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Meacham. So it would just update the numbers to kind of reflect for this fiscal year, right?
Yeah, it revises that second paragraph from the one we sent last year.
Okay. So do you want to suggest a motion, Mr. Holupka?
I would move that, we accept this revised addition to the transmission memo that we will then vote on at the next board meeting.
Okay, so not to accept it, but to have planning staff draft it, correct? And
Oh,
that will
correct.
review it.
Yeah, right, because we'll vote on it the next time.
Okay. Do I need to do a roll call vote for that? Ms. Meacham?
Discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's a motion. I think it needs to be seconded.
Yeah. So is that your official motion, Scott, is to have planning staff draft a revised letter and we vote on it next time?
I guess, yeah.
Okay. Does anybody second that motion?
Second.
Okay. Thanks, Ms. German. So, Mr. Heckman, did you have something to discuss? And then we will go into discussion for every. Thank you.
I just had a question, Scott. To the part at the end that says we want the extra money to go towards backlog before new projects. Was that the wording from last year as well, or did we add that this time?
What we said last year was planning board suggests that these deferred capital needs be considered in future capital allocations, including investing more capital funds in the county's older communities before building new facilities elsewhere. So it wasn't quite the same language, but it had a very similar intent.
Okay.
And we can always, Mr. Heckman, obviously review the new draft letter for this year and discuss it, whatever.
And edit it again. I mean, I was putting this out for discussion.
Yeah.
It should.
I guess I'm
for
just not. I'm sorry, Peter.
No, it should be for discussion because the backlog and the new project, they can be done concurrently in certain situations. You can't just push new projects, at the back end just because of the backlog. So things can be done concurrently.
Right.
In some areas.
Yeah. Okay. So I do have some hands up. So Mr. Ray, thank you for that. Mr. Heckman, are you done before I move on? I just want to make sure I get everybody, and we're kind of cutting each
I
other.
was going to say something similar because it makes it sound like so definitive and absolute. no new
It's
projects until we get all this backlog cleared out. And I'm not sure we want to exactly say that, although I
no.
agree.
Okay, so right now, and those are good points. Right now, the motion is just to draft a new letter, but these are good suggestions for planning staff as they're going through that. Mr. Johnson, did you have a question?
Yes. How are we determining what older communities get it? I mean, is there a criteria, a list of who gets what first? Because it just says older communities. So I'm trying to figure out in the county what communities are we talking about and who gets who. What's it determined? How is it determined who gets the money for what resource in their community?
If that's a fair question, I mean, I think the school system is the only agency that sort of does a ranking of what projects they think are most important. And that's not just old communities, but that's how we had, Gotten Towson High School and Laney Valley and they sort of made some ranking. We don't do that, I think, in most other areas, although it sounds like some of the departments may.
I think property management does too, Scott.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So those are all good points. So to your question, Mr. Johnson, maybe it's not investing in older communities, but it's probably older facilities is really what the intent was.
Well, and a combination, a lot of the older facilities are in the older communities.
Yeah, so Mr. Johnson brings up a good point. It's a little vague, so maybe we clean that up on this year's draft.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, did you have anything else?
Yeah, that was it. I just wanted to make sure it's clear so that it's very clear. So when we go to do this or somebody reads it, they understand it just like we do.
Right.
Mr. Ray, did you have another question? Because your hand
Yeah,
is still-
it's a comment. I do agree with Scott with Mr. Johnson that we do not want to create that impression that on the older communities. First of all, it is hard to determine which ones are those. Since the property management that's their job, they do that. So I just don't want to paint the picture that we don't want new projects except unless the backlog is clear. So we don't want to create stagnation as well.
Okay, thank you.
No, but I guess my concern is, as we heard, you start adding new facilities, et cetera, then you're creating a bigger capital nut that the county has to deal with. And at the end of the day, you are sort of, if you're going to build some new facility, that's money you don't have to do some other sort of repair. You build a new road, you may not have the money to repave some other road. You build a new park, you may not have the money to fix up some other parks. It's kind of a zero sum at the end of the day. And just to be more conscious and aware, and not just, because politicians like to propose lots of new shiny things, but we often have older things that need repair. Not as exciting to repair the sewer line, but it needs to get done.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Meneses, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, mainly a comment, but it applies mainly to like new buildings, like property management might find that it's more economical or financially more financially beneficial if a new building is built instead of putting money into an old building in Paris, like with Delaney High School. I mean,
That's true. That's true.
so, but true, I think in roads and sewer systems and that sort of thing, definitely, I think it's important to replace or upgrade the older infrastructure before moving on to, I don't know, creating new roads or something to that effect. So I guess I don't know what my point is actually. Maybe the wording shouldn't be so cut and dry.
Right.
I guess is my point.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? Mr. Ray and Mr. Johnson, your hands are still up, and I'm gonna assume that I got to your questions.
Yes, yes, you did.
Yes, you did. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
you.
No, it's fine. Anybody else on the board? Okay, so Scott, we had the motion to draft a new updated letter for planning staff, please, planning staff. We had the second from Ms. German. Ms. Meacham, do I need to do a roll call or I guess so, right? Because it's a new motion.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do a roll call for the motion that Mr. Holupka brought up. Does anybody need him to say the motion again, or are we good? Looking at screens.
We're good.
Okay, we're good. All right.
Yeah.
Mr. Array,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Aye.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Ms. German,
Yes.
Mr. Heckman,
Aye.
Mr. Heinel, Mr. Hinton,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Miss Lilly, Miss Muneses,
Aye.
Miss Pinero,
Aye.
Mr. Schulman,
Aye.
Mr. Tennant.
Aye.
Perfect. And then I am also an aye, so that motion does carry. So, Ms. Meacham, if you guys can work on that and then circulate that, that would be great.
Yep. Mhm.
Thank you. Anything else that needs to be brought up before we move to finish or adjourn? Okay. This concludes the work session of the Planning Board Subcommittee on the Capital Improvement Budget and Program. The final vote on the Capital Improvement Program is scheduled for our next regularly planned meeting, which is on March the 5th, 2026, and this meeting will be virtual. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight, and this meeting is hereby adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.